Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. You can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and now Amazon Music. Also, YouTube.com/Annette Talks if you want to see what we look like. And you can also find me on Facebook.com/Annette Talks. And today we're going to be talking about something that's pretty huge right now. We do not live in boring times, I'll say that. We're going to be talking about the Supreme Court Justice nomination that we're about to dive into here now that we just lost the notorious RBG. And to help me with this topic, we have my friend and Constitution expert, DK Williams. Hi, DK.
Hello, Annette. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back again. As soon as this hit, I thought, I need to get DK on because this is huge. This is a really big deal. I mean, it's funny because RBG, she hung around for a long time and started to feel like she was never going to go. And so, I mean, I'm sure she was trying to hold on until the election.
Sure.
But
don't we all?
Yeah. So she went, and it was really quick. And she was a very powerful lady, even though she and I were on opposite ends of the political spectrum and our viewpoint of the Constitution. You have to give her props because she was a strong lady, stood up for what she believed in, and boy, she hung in there. So when she finally went, it was a surprise. But before I forget, DK, tell us about your podcast, because you're a Constitution expert, because you look at these actual Supreme Court cases and actually read them and then podcast about them. So
that's what I try to do. I enjoy doing that. It's called The Law with DK Williams. And to keep up with it, if you follow me on Twitter, whenever there's a new podcast, I'll put the link up there to it and a little description of it. And so on Twitter, it's The Law, DKW. So check that out. Otherwise, you can go right to their website. I'm part of the Speakeasy Ideas Network. So go to speakeasyideas.com/The Law. And you'll see my podcast there. I've got 83 of them, I think, now. And so there's a lot of important cases that the Supreme Court just decided this most recent term. And so we talk about some of those, and then we go back to do a lot of historical ones as well. So yeah, check that out. It's Twitter @TheLawDKW, and that'll keep you abreast to the podcast and some other things that go on in the legal world.
Awesome. And your
Thanks.
Podcasts are very easy listening, especially considering the subject matter. So if you've ever wanted to hear about a Supreme Court case and you didn't want to wade through the whole decision on your own, go to DK's website or DK's podcast, find where he covered it, and listen to it. It'll be a lot more.
If you have any cases you would like me to cover, let me know. And they're not that long. They're usually about 30 minutes, give or take. So you don't have to commit that much time to it.
Right. It's a quick 30 minutes too, though, because they're entertaining, which is nice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So there are so many moving parts to what's going on. Because obviously we just lost a liberal Supreme Court justice, and we now have 8 justices on the court, which obviously is an even number, which is a problem. And we'll get to that a little bit more later. But one of those justices, which it looks like 5-3, conservative versus liberal, but not really, because Justice Roberts has more than once voted with the 3 liberals, just to make it easy on everyone to understand. So we really have a 4-4 split court right now. And so there are obvious implications with that we will get to at the end of this discussion. But what I want to talk about now is what can possibly happen over the next few months. And a lot of options here. So we have some nominees. I wanted to go through those real quick first, just the ones that are most likely. Right now, it looks like Trump is leaning heavily towards Amy Coney Barrett. And Trump at one point had said that he was saving her to replace Ginsburg. When that time came, when someone asked him about who he was going to have when he was nominated Kavanaugh, and I think that's the time he said, "Well, I'm saving Coney Barrett for when RBG is out," because I think it was the whole symmetry of replacing a female with a female. And I'm not one for identity politics. And to me, I could care less if it's male or female. I just want someone who's going to be a textualist and an originalist and
Right.
Constitution the way I do. But I think it's smart if you can get both of those in this case so that you have an easier time getting the nominee through. And so Coney Barrett she's 48. She's a judge on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, was on the short list of nominees to fill Scalia's seat, which instead went to Gorsuch. She is solidly conservative, Midwesterner, Catholic, former Notre Dame law professor, mother of 7. And she met with Trump on Monday, and she's already being viciously smeared by the left. But she's being smeared for her faith. And it's like the left has forgotten about the was it Article 6, Article 7 rule against religious tests. Religion shouldn't even come into it, but of course it does because of the Roe v. Wade implications.
Right.
And so a lot of the left gets hysterical when they think that Roe v. Wade may be overturned at some point, even though, that's another discussion, but that may not make much of it.
I did a podcast on Roe versus Wade.
That's right. So if you're curious about that, go find that episode and listen to it, because a lot of people make more of that case than they need to. But right now, she looks like the most likely. She clerked for Scalia, and he's reported to have said that he loved her, and he didn't have feelings for his clerks. One of the things I heard today was that he used to say that they were fungible, and so he wasn't going to like anyone more than the other. But he apparently said that he loved this lady, and so to me that means she must have really seen things the way he did. I'm just guessing that would be why. But she seems pretty solidly in the same camp with Scalia, and she was under his tutelage, and she's got a long record to point to. So she seems the most likely right now. A few other options were Barbara Lagoa, and then Joan Larson, Allison Jones Rushing, Kate Todd. And the most interesting other one to me, which is not even on the list because I don't think Trump ever raised it, was Mike Lee. And
Right.
the obvious issue with Mike Lee is that he's a sitting senator. So
Right.
have you found out anything about that? Like, do you know at all whether he could vote for himself?
I did look into that a little bit. Well, there's certainly nothing constitutionally that would prevent it. So it would go down to like Senate rules, but I don't think there's anything presenting it or preventing that.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of makes you think about, could he ask himself questions? I mean, that would be silly, but, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. And also it raises the issue of, let's just assume there's no legal impediment to him being appointed. Would his fellow senators feel more comfortable or less comfortable voting?
I don't think it would matter. I think the Republicans would vote for him, and most of the Democrats, probably all of them, would not.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we're going to assume it's probably going to be Coney Barrett. I would be surprised if it's not.
I kind of think I like Lagoa as a dark horse, and primarily for political reasons. She hasn't written as much controversial stuff as Coney Barrett. There's a lot of things that Democrats will freak out about, that she's written about abortion. I mean, she's basically come out and said she thinks it's a bad decision. Roe versus Wade is a bad decision. I don't know that Lagoa has ever made any comments like that before, and I don't think she's been on the bench as long. Mm-hmm. So, and she hasn't written, and she hasn't been a professor. They talk a lot and write a lot. So, and I love the fact that she is a first-generation Cuban immigrant. Her parents came over. I think that's a perspective that would be excellent on the court. She's talked about how her parents lived under a dictatorship, and how much that is different than what we have. And I think she would appreciate that, or she does appreciate that, and would bring that important perspective to it. So we shall see if she is the appointment or not. Everybody is saying, you're right, it's going to be Coney Barrett. But I kind of like the possibility of Democrats having to criticize another wise Latina, since they loved Sotomayor when she said that.
That's right. Well, and the other interesting thing about Lagoa is that she served pro bono on the legal team representing the Miami-based relatives of Cuban-born Ian Gonzalez.
He did.
And that child custody, remember that thing was huge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a big kerfuffle. And
Yeah, that's back when Democrats, because that was Clinton and Marino, when they didn't mind pointing machine guns at immigrant kids.
yeah,
Everybody's seen that picture.
that was, I'll never forget that picture. That was terrible. Yep. That was really bad. So that would be an interesting aspect of the whole.
Yeah, that would come up.
So anyway, all right. So we're just going to move forward pretending.
Whoever it is, right. It'll be someone.
Yeah, it'll be someone. Someone's going to be announced by Trump or nominated by Trump on Saturday, 5 p.m. And he's given this time for everyone to, mourn Ginsburg, which is appropriate. So then it's off to the races, and there's all sorts of different ways this could go. So we have obviously an election coming up. Less than a month and a half, not very long. And so there are several ways it could go. We could have the hearings before the election and the vote before the election. We could have the hearings before and the vote after. Or doesn't the Senate have the option to just say, we're not going to do hearings and we're just going to do an up and down vote? I mean, I could see that happening because, Coney Barrett, it was 3 years ago, appointed to the Federal Court of Appeals and already went through this process.
Yep.
So she's already been vetted. It'd be kind of hard for Democrats to come back now and say, well. Oh,
no, they would do it easily.
Okay, well, it'll be hard to have any credibility doing that.
They're not worried about that.
I agree 100% with you on that.
I mean, none of them. It's not just Democrats.
Right. Well, and so there's something like 14, or is it 14? I read recently that they only have, I think, 14 days that they're actually sitting in the Senate right now.
Between now and the election. Yeah,
between now and the election. And add to that the fact that there's an election and a lot of them need to go home and
campaign.
Yeah, campaign, and some of them are in some tight races. So, off the bat, we know that Collins and Murkowski are not going to vote for this.
Murkowski actually kind of walked it back today.
Really?
Yeah, she said, I can't really comment on a nominee who hasn't been nominated yet. So kind of like, well, maybe I will. So
really?
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, she said that to Alaska newspaper today.
Interesting.
Reported today.
Right. So, but let's just assume that even if we lose her, we still have enough votes. The Republicans still have enough votes to get the simple majority that they need. But the issue is getting through hearings on time to get a vote before, if they want to try and get this wrapped up before the election, because the Democrats could decide to pull all sorts of delaying tactics.
Sure.
And so if they do delay it long enough, they may have to wait until after the election.
Right.
And then you may end up with a lame duck president.
Lame ducks have the exact same power they have before they're lame ducks. Their term lasts until the next guy is a person is sworn in.
Right.
Then it just becomes a political matter. But they have the exact same authority. And, Obama has said that. Ginsburg said that, 4 years ago. It's not an issue. I mean, the lame duck president, Congress is still in charge until the new people are sworn in. And we can talk about that whole Adams thing whenever you are ready.
Right.
I'll make that comparison.
So it seems likely that someone will be appointed before.
Yeah, this weekend.
Right. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, one of the big questions is if no one is confirmed before the election, and then we have a contested election like we did in 2000. And I don't see a whole lot of talk about that, which is interesting because already we see both sides really gearing up for this to be an extremely contentious election. Whether or not it ends up being contested or not, I don't know. I mean, it seems like most of the threats right now are, we hear a lot of people on the left say they're going to take to the streets and, actual rioting and that kind
all kinds of threats.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And so again, it's not a boring time we live in. I keep thinking, every time I start getting sort of anxious and ill at ease, I say, well, it's not boring anyway. But let's just assume that it's contested in a similar way that the Bush-Gore election was contested.
Which I also did a podcast on.
You did. All right. See,
Lots of
He's
important.
all over this.
Yes.
That shouldn't surprise me. I've listened to several of your episodes, but I don't think I listened to that one. So I guess I need to go back.
Bush v. Gore. Yes.
Yeah, that was a big one. I can remember that election night too. I had worked the election. I was at the, I was living in Arizona. I was downtown at some ballroom, waiting for the results. And of course we all thought, well, here are the results around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever, go home, go to bed. And there we are standing around, in all the red, white, and blue and everything, and all the balloons everywhere. And waiting.
Yep.
Nothing ever happens, and end up going home going, what is going on? And
Right.
then, of course,
Florida, yeah.
how long did it take before that was finally decided? Remember how many days it was in between?
It was at least a week. It was at least a week.
So that is not something we're used to in this country. We're used to going to bed knowing who the president is, or going to bed and waking up the next day and knowing.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly, as a quick aside, people can look this up. I encourage them to. If we didn't have plurality voting, that would not have been an issue. If people recall, it was Florida was the only issue. Nader got a substantial number of votes. If something like 60% of Nader's votes had gone to Gore, Gore would have won Florida, and he would have gotten the Electoral College votes. He would have been the president. And so if we had approval voting, you guys can look that up, wouldn't have happened, or even ranked choice voting, which isn't quite as good in my opinion, but it still would have solved that problem.
Which reminds me that we still need
Yeah.
to do our episode.
All right.
And
Yeah.
with the election coming up, we need to get to that, to the different voting options. Because
Yeah.
a lot of us don't ever give any thought to it because we've just,
It's what we've been told. I
Yeah.
mean, when I first had the idea mentioned to me, my initial reaction was, oh, that's crazy. But it's not, because there's a great book called Gaming the Vote by William Poundstone on it. That's what I recommend
yeah.
for a
I
good
need to
starting point.
find that
It
book.
convinced me. And that guy's not a politician at all. He's a mathematician. And he just talks about the math of voting, basically.
Awesome. Well, I will find that book. I will read that book, and then we're going to do that podcast before the
All
election.
right.
All right. So let's just say that it does work out that this becomes contested. And with all these mail-in votes, there are so many different things that could happen. But let's just say it needs to go to the Supreme Court. And we only have the 8 because
Right.
Trump failed to secure.
Well, even if he nominated him today, I don't know if they would. I mean, I don't really see any practical situation where a new justice would take place by November 3rd, right? I mean, because they would have to be there at the time the election occurred, right? Or,
Right.
there's not much wiggle room there. And so, yeah, the 4-4 problem is real, but I don't know if it can even be resolved at this point, given the time frame involved. But-
So you don't think it's possible to have the new justice seated by election day?
I think it's highly unlikely. Highly
All right.
unlikely. But
All right.
I guess it is possible. It's certainly
Yeah,
possible.
I read some article and they said at the end it was possible, but they'd have to go at a Formula One pace right
Right.
now, or NASCAR or something, one of those. Anyway, all right, so let's just then assume that we don't have a seated 9th
If it's
justice,
8, yep.
and it's 8.
Mhm.
What can happen here? I mean, I know that if you've got a tie, let's say you end up with a 4-4 split, which is a good possibility, that the lower court's opinion stands. And in the case of Florida, it did go to a lower court first, right? And then it went up to this. I can't remember. Did the lower court? How did the?
It went to the Florida State Supreme Court
Okay,
and then to the U.S. Supreme Court.
and did the Supreme Court overturn the lower court, or did it uphold it? I don't remember the lower court's.
They overturned it.
Okay.
You know what? There's a lot of different opinions in that. Go check out my podcast because I remembered it at that point.
Find it. All right. So there's a possibility that a lower court gets it, makes a decision, goes up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's split, and it goes back down, and then the lower court's decision is the one that stands, right? Isn't that the way it works?
Yeah, that's normally how it would happen. A couple of things on that as a practical matter. Roberts would do everything in his power as Chief Justice to come up with some kind of compromise to avoid that, just as a practical matter. So he would, really try to work something out. Doesn't mean, but still, maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe it would be 4-4. And I think one of the issues here is because votes are counted at the state level. So if there's multiple states with issues, there's multiple state Supreme Courts that would have to weigh in on it.
Ooh.
And even if they expedite that, it's going to be an issue. And then you might have conflicting state Supreme Court opinions, and then it goes to U.S. Supreme Court, right? It could be, we could be like a banana republic with different people making a claim to the presidency. Yeah.
That's kind of like your electoral, faithless elector discussion we had, where you could end up
rogue elector. Faithless is so judgmental.
Right, sorry, rogue elector. Independent. Where you have two separate camps, like you have a Biden camp and a Trump camp, both set up, both claiming to be president, and
right.
no one.
Well, the Supreme Court did take care of that one, which we covered. The electors can be bound by what their state legislature tells them to do. So,
I also failed to neglected to mention at the beginning that you're an attorney, I'm an attorney, so we both have a little bit of background in this.
For whatever that's worth, yes.
Yeah. So there is actually a potential for a banana republic type situation here where we don't have a decision.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what happens then?
I think we would be in uncharted territory.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on exactly what the conflict is. How it might be resolved. Perhaps Congress could resolve it depending what the issue is. Or Nancy Pelosi becomes acting president because she's third in line as Speaker of the House. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, I have no idea how it would unfold because you don't know exactly what the issues are going to be, right? Or what they might be. It's probably an unlimited number, but yes, be prepared for some kind of, at least the potential for some kind of chaos.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling there's going to be chaos in one way or another.
Right. Yeah, probably will
be.
Be.
One, or whether it's, like Trump wins, but the left doesn't accept it and goes nuts, and
Right.
Well, and something else that was raised in one of these articles was the idea that, let's say that they did go Formula One speed, they got someone seated, and then you had a contested election, and then you have this brand newly minted justice who then has to help decide.
Right.
And so, if they decide in Trump's favor, it looks entirely political, and that's kind of stinky too. And
but just one example of this is that Nixon appointed several Supreme Court justices during his tenure there, and then when his claim of executive privilege that he didn't have to answer subpoenas, didn't have to turn over the tapes and everything, went to the U.S. Supreme Court, when William Rehnquist, who Nixon had appointed, voted against him. So that's one of the reasons that federal judges have a lifetime appointment, because at that point they don't have any political consequences of doing what they, the idea is that they do what's right. They apply the law without regard to political consequences.
Right.
So once somebody is appointed, they don't have to worry about them being, losing their job.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the main reason that federal judges and justices get a lifetime appointment. So they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, people would complain. Absolutely. No matter what, they're going to complain.
Well, and the thing is right now that people complaining is not the same as it used to be just a few years ago. Now people complaining has become burning cities down, and also there's the threat right now that we have from Democrats that they want to pack the court. And so if, let's say, Trump gets someone in as a lame duck, Democrats have taken the Senate and they decide to pack the court, meaning they want to add a number of justices to the court.
I think 3 would do it.
Yeah. So that's what FDR threatened, right? Back when he was trying to pass all his New Deal legislation, and it kept being overturned in the Supreme Court. And so he said, well, I'm just going to appoint more judges.
Right. Well, it would have to go through Congress, but
Right.
yeah.
But
right.
he was going to instigate that.
Right.
And so the court said,
Yeah. There's a story. There's one guy in particular who there's a phrase, the switch in time that saved 9.
uh-huh.
And there's one justice who the legend goes, he was the one that flipped over. He denied that later on after he had been retired and he was asked about it. He actually wrote a statement about it. He denied that's what happened. He tried to explain, why his votes appeared to change. And it makes sense to me. And I did a podcast on that case. So switch in time that saved 9. But they definitely, the Supreme Court definitely during the FDR era, the New Deal era, started approving the New Deal programs that previously, very similar programs, they had overturned.
Mm-hmm.
So that was maybe a coincidence that it happened about the same time FDR said, hey, I'm going to talk to, and FDR had to support in the Congress to do it.
Right.
Whether or not they would have is another thing, but he controlled his party. Democrats control Congress. They could have done it if they had the political will. And that's what it boils down to, is the political will.
Mm-hmm.
All this talk about consistency and honor and integrity, none of that means anything. Zero.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rules are very, very clear. Trump can nominate somebody, the Congress can't approve them. That's it. Now, there will be political consequences to that, absolutely. But that's what it is. It's a political question. And as part of that, Democrats, like you said, they can, if they lose this, if Trump nominates a justice, gets approved, they take a seat, then the Democrats take over the Senate because they have to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. They can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
If they take over the Senate, which is possible, if they have the political will, they can do it. Nothing they can do about it. If they have if they take over, then they've got the votes. They've got the constitutional authority. Constitution says nothing about the number of federal judges or justices. That's set by Congress. They have that constitutional authority, just a matter of political will. And I don't think that's a slam dunk because there's going to be a lot of Democrats, some anyway, they're like, do we really want to do this? Even Biden on the campaign trail just a year ago said he didn't think it was a good idea because he said, if we do that, then we lose control. Then the Republicans nominate 3 more. And then at some point we have a 31, make it an odd number, members of the Supreme Court. And then we've just kind of made a joke out of it.
Right.
So, it's purely a matter of political will because they've got the authority to do it. And we shall have to see if they even want to, and if they want to, if they can. Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that actually happening, but then so much that I've seen happen over the last year or two is beyond I never thought I would be seeing the outright overt, open attempt to put socialism in place in my lifetime either. I thought living through the Cold War, we'd already answered that question. I thought we had already settled that, that it doesn't work. And yet now it's just, I'm reading like 5-6 books on socialism, Marxism right now to try and get a really strong handle on this.
Right.
I never thought I would need to be, that was going to be necessary in my lifetime,
Right.
I was talking to my dad about that. He said the same thing. He's like, hey, that never occurred to me that would be where we would be headed.
Well,
so I can't
you mention
say,
the John Adams thing? Can I get to go ahead to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Because if you hate what Trump is doing now, you would have hated John Adams and the Federalists back in 1800. Because what happened back then, if you've seen the Broadway hit by Lin-Manuel Miranda Hamilton, the election of 1800 was a big deal. And John Adams was a sitting president. His party was the Federalists. They controlled Congress. They lost. Adams lost to Jefferson, and the Federalists lost control to Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. There was a time when they were lame duck, like we mentioned. Adams was still president during the lame duck time. So, and the Federalists controlled Congress, even though they're lame ducks. They had the exact same powers they did beforehand. And what they did in a big middle finger to Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans as a whole, the Congress passed a law creating a whole bunch of new federal judgeships. This is after they had lost. So they passed this law. We're going to create a whole bunch of new federal judgeships. Adams is going to appoint a whole bunch of federalists to these federal judgeships, and we'll approve them. And it went up to the day before Jefferson was sworn in, which on a March 4th, they did it in March back then. The day before Adams power was up and Jefferson was going to take over, he's still signing appointments, right? And Congress on March 3rd, their last day of power, voted them all in, approved them all, like en masse, right? So, and that out of that, one of the people that were appointed, it was to they don't have these anymore, but it was a federal justice of the peace position, William Marbury. So his case went on to become Marbury versus Madison. It came out of what Adams was doing. Marbury was a pretty well-off businessman who supported the Federalists, so he got one of these appointments. Then when Jefferson did take over, some of these appointments hadn't been delivered yet, and that was part of what had to be done. Marbury's was one that had not been delivered, and Jefferson's and Madison, who was the Secretary of State, we're not no way, don't deliver those. And that was the issue. Marbury said, you have to deliver it. And Jefferson said, no, we don't. And it went up to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court threw it out because they said that we didn't have jurisdiction. But yeah.
Thank you for the historical context.
It happened early, 1800.
And the thing is, I laugh at it because, I'm a big Adams fan. I love John Adams. I didn't like the Alien and Sedition.
Well, the Alien and Sedition Act, that's one of the main reasons they lost in 1800.
Yeah, well, elections have consequences. Actions affect elections. But I laugh at it because I liked him. And of course, I want Trump to nominate someone because I want a good originalist.
Someone who follows the Constitution.
Right. And so,
crazy.
But, when you have control of the Senate, you can do what you want. And I think it's actually incumbent on you as the president, especially if you are a lame duck, to get what you can done when you can. So Obama couldn't do it because he didn't control the Senate. People are yelling in arms well, he couldn't do it. Well, he didn't control the Senate. And that's the key difference.
If he did, Merrick Garland would be on the Supreme Court justice.
He would. And that's just the way it goes.
And and that's the way Congress should have handled this. Senate should have handled this. None of this about, it's not fair, we have to wait till after. Just stop with that nonsense.
Yeah, it is ridiculous.
That's just nonsense. What they should have said was, we control the Senate, we got the power, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
That's it. Because that's the reality. None of this, now everything they said back then about, it's not fair, it's coming back to bite them because now it's the exact opposite situation.
Mm-hmm.
But they should have said, we controlled Congress, the Senate. That's what's important for confirming a Supreme Court justice. We controlled the Senate in 16. We didn't do it because we had the power. Now we control the Senate. Yep, we're going to do it because we have the power. That's it. That's the end of the analysis. That's the end of the discussion. Everything else is just faux flowers over power. Trying to cover up the real thing.
Yeah. No, you're right. That is. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was that if we do end up with an 8 on the court and we have a 4-4 split, there are a couple of big cases coming up before the court at the end of the year that are going to be affected by it. And one of them has to do with Obamacare. And if you don't like Obamacare, it's actually a good thing because one of the lower courts has basically decimated it. And so if it goes to the Supremes and it's a split, it goes back down and it stays. That decision is upheld. It stays in place. And then the other one had to do with... I did a
podcast on those cases. So on the Obama case, it came out of Texas District Court. I won't get into all of it, but he ruled that because there's no longer a tax, it was no longer any good. Fifth Circuit, Court of Appeals, whichever one's in New Orleans, I forget the numbers, agreed with him, but they didn't throw the whole thing out. They sent it back to the district court judge to determine what parts could be severed and what parts couldn't. But that got appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, so it didn't get sent back down. The whole thing went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So, yeah, that's pending.
Right, and then the other was something about Robert Mueller. Oh, yeah, the court's going to hear the arguments in the case regarding House Democrats' ability to access grand jury materials from former special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation A federal appeals court sided with the House Democrats earlier this year, but the Supreme Court stayed the decision, agreed to hear arguments in the case this term. So that's another one that isn't possibly going to be affected by this. So just for fun, what do you think is going to happen, and when do you think it's going to happen? Just for kicks.
I think that Trump will nominate someone. The person will be confirmed. It could be before the election. Now that I think about it, it's possible. I think it's probably more likely to happen after the election, even if they lose and they're lame ducks. I think they'll do it, and then it's just a matter of what happens in the elections. If the Democrats take over the Senate, and if they really want to pack the court, they can. It's just a matter not if they got the will.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and just go out on a limb and say Coney Barrett's going to be seated before the election, but it's going to take. Well, McConnell might be able to do it. He's pretty wily.
Yeah, there are all kinds of Senate rules that he knows them all. So whatever they are, he will use them. I mean, of course, Schumer's going to use them to his advantage too to delay it, but that's the intrigue we shall have to watch unfold.
Excellent. Well, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to discuss.
Awesome.
Everyone, pay attention to this. This is not going to be boring over the next few months. Are not going to be boring in the league.
No.
If anything, they're going to be terrifying. So keep watching and go and find DK's podcast. There's all sorts of great episodes. You've heard several mentioned today. Remind us where we can find those.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the easiest thing to do, I think, is to follow the podcast on Twitter at @TheLawDKW. All new podcasts will be shown there. You can link to them, or there will be a link to them. And there'll also be other type of legal news that comes from that Twitter account. Facebook, if you don't do Twitter, it's facebook.com/thelawwithdkwilliams. And the website itself, part of the Speakeasy Ideas Network, speakeasyideas.com/thelaw. So check it out. Let me know. Holler at me. I'll answer whatever questions you might have.
Great. All right. Thank you very much for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.